And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your RBLR Rays show. Once again, it's me, your host, Zach Dobb, along with Pat. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing good. Happy 2024, everyone. I hope
Indeed.
you all are going to have a good year ahead of you. I know it's going to be your year, and I'll tell you why. It's because you're listening to the RBLR Rays show. It means you're a smart guy or gal, and you're switched on. And I was going to say that the Rays were like new year, new me, but turns out they're not. They're going back to their old habits. First thing they do in the new year is make a trade with the Mariners. So they're just keeping on doing
and then trade with the
best.
Cardinals. So I mean, we're just going back to the old bag of tricks. But if you want to be around to see what we're going to have to say about all of that, because we do have plenty to say about all the moves that have been going on this week, now is a good time to like and subscribe to continue to support the show, continue to support what we're building here. We're going to keep doing great things, and we got some fun stuff coming throughout the rest of this offseason, building back up to the start of another great season for the Rays. So please give us a like and subscribe, follow on all of the platforms that you will see in the description, and continue to be a part of what we're building. But we do have a good bit to talk about today. We've got two trades to talk about, both from players who were a part of what this team made this team special in previous seasons. They contributed in big ways, and it's sad to see him go, but there are some good things to talk about in the return. So let's dive right into it. The first trade that we're going to talk about today was a trade that the Rays made. I believe it was on, when was it? On the 4th. It was on the 5th. They made both these trades on the 5th. So the first trade, Luke Raley is on his way over to Seattle in return for, how do I say his name? I'm going to say it wrong. José Caballero. We're going to go with that.
Caballero.
Yeah, that was abysmal. But that was the first big trade. It was kind of surprising. Were you surprised, Pat?
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't think Luke Raley was not in the plans for 2024. I thought he was going to be, the DH, corner outfielder, sometimes first base, kind of utility lefty power bat that he was last year. I was a bit surprised to see him moved along so suddenly. But I think there's reasons to why this trade has happened. And I think after the initial shock of Luke Raley being traded away so suddenly and unexpectedly. And I think there's a lot to break down. What was your initial reaction to the trade?
It was definitely a surprise. I didn't expect it to happen when it did. I thought there was a chance that Luke Raley got moved, that one of Luke Raley or Harold Ramirez got moved at some point. I did not think it would be before the season. I thought that was going to be a trade deadline type of thing. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. When I saw what they got back in return, it didn't shock me, because it's very clear that there's going to be some need for some depth in the middle infield. And as a little bit of an addendum to that, one thing we found out in kind of the press releases around this trade, Eric Neander said that they do not expect Walls to be ready for opening day. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to be out for an extended period of time after that, but it does sound like there is at least some world where we do not have Walls available for the first week or two of the season. So it's very clear that they felt that they needed to add a little bit of extra depth there to just back that up in case, Walls isn't ready to go. And then let's say Basabe gets off to a rough start, because I guess my assumption at the moment would be that Basabe was going to step in and take those reps that Walls would have, but I don't know. And I guess maybe what they're going to do is bring in a guy like Caballeros. I'm gonna go with that to push Basabe a little bit, and to push Walls when he's back and healthy, and see what we could get out of those positions, and see if we can just get the best possible out of those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're on the money there. It was a bit of a unexpected turn that they're saying that Walls might not be ready for opening day. When he got the surgery, the initial timeline was he would be fine for opening day, and we hadn't heard any real updates from his rehab, and usually no news is good news when it comes to rehabbing from long-term surgery like that. So it was a bit strange that we heard that Walls might not be ready for opening day, but I think even if he is, because there's still a possibility that he is, but you just want to cover your bases. I think a good philosophy to have is you always want the middle of your ballpark to be really sound defensively. So you want your middle infielders and you want your center fielder to be as good at fielding as possible, because they often are the hardest positions to play on the diamond. And that's why center fielders and shortstops accrue the most WAR, because good fielding there is so much value to a baseball team. There's a reason that there's a premium on those positions. And Caballero plays a really, really good middle infield. So last year with the Mariners, he played a good amount of second base. That was kind of his primary position, but he could play shortstop as well. He did play shortstop, and he can play third base as well. So he can play all over. And something that you're going to love to hear about Caballero is that he is an outstanding fielder. Last year, across all positions, he accrued 8 outs above average, which is good for 21st in all of Major League infielders last year. He's in the conversation with the likes of Ha-Seong Kim, who was, really, really good, has a reputation for being a really good fielder, just around the conversation with Javi Baez, with Nick Ahmed. And the crazy thing is he accrues those outs above average in about 100 less games. Well, not 100 less games, but significantly less games than those guys. He didn't play the full season with the big league club. So over a full season, you could see him being a top 10 infielder defensively. His arm is not quite as exciting. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, which is why he's mostly played second base, but I think he's more than serviceable as a shortstop. So Caballero, really, really good fielder, really fast as well, 90th percentile sprint speed. So he's going to give you a ton of speed, a ton of fielding. And, if that's all he's there for, he's like a Nadani Hechavarria type kind of stopgap while we wait for Walls, or perhaps Basabe to kick it into gear, or we see a breakout from Junior Caminero, or eventually Carson Williams might, really just suddenly ascend through the minors really quickly. As a stopgap middle infielder, while we're kind of short in that department, excellent, because Brandon Lau's going to need time off his feet as well, and a good second baseman like Caballero is great. So I think he is not going to set the world on fire. I don't think he's going to win MVP, but he is going to do what the Rays want him to do, which is run really fast, play really good defense up the middle, and give good at bats. I'm happy with that. What do you think about Caballero?
Yeah, the thing that drew my eyes when I just pull him up on Fangraphs right after we traded for him was that he generated 2.2 FWAR last year, and that's not nothing. Like to especially considering he only played 104 games is all he played, and he only had 280 plate appearances. So this is not a guy that got a whole lot of opportunities, but he definitely was doing what he could to make the most of them. Obviously, the bat is not the greatest thing in the world. However, 96 WRC plus, and I will say, if you do take a peek back through his minor league career, the bat has been above average more often than not in the minors. So is it possible the Rays could unlock something? Who knows? I don't have any advanced stats at my immediate disposal to show that he's going to turn it on right away in the major leagues and be a super valuable bat. But it's not outside the realm of possibility for him to at least be league average. Which I think if you could get some league average bat from that role in this team, I'd be pretty happy with that. Especially if Walls is going to be out for an extended period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something that was pretty eye-popping about Caballero is his swing decisions are really, really good. He had a 10% walk rate in the majors, which is above average. It's good, in fact. So he gets on base at a good clip. He had a 343 on base percentage. So while the 221 batting average wasn't particularly special, a 343 on base percentage is like, hey, that's solid. We like that. So we love that. And that contributed a lot to his WRC being as high as it was, because when he did hit the ball, it wasn't particularly amazing, but he does get on base a lot because he is good at taking his walks. I mean, last year in the minors, he only played a very, very small amount of games in the minors last year. But in 31 games in AA, 26% walk rate. In 10 games in AAA, 30% walk rate. This guy controls the strike zone really well. He's really good at knowing what to swing at. And he also has an above average swing and miss rate. And by that, I mean, he swings and miss is less than the major league average, which is really good. So he'll make contact. So, if you're like, hey, just put the ball in play, dummy, he will do that, and he will take his walks. And if he is, not swinging and missing and striking out a ton, that's going to be even better because of his plus speed. So a walk could turn into a double or even a triple with the amount of stolen bases he can get. So there is potential there for sure. He does pull a lot of his hits as well. He doesn't go oppo very often. So I wonder if the Rays can find some way to kind of better capitalize on the amount he pulls his pitches. I don't know if it's a case of, well, he already does that, so there's nothing really to exploit there. But if there is, the Rays will probably try and find it.
Yeah, I mean, you think that there's some things that the Rays have been, emphasizing in their organization that you see there. So you'd have to think the Rays are just going to continue to encourage that, and maybe encourage him to don't be afraid to take a few more walks. Don't feel like you have to do everything with the bat. We have guys here who can drive you in if you get on base. I think about putting a guy with a high on base percentage in like the 9-hole for Yandy Diaz to have a guy on base. Mm-hmm. I mean, that could be a really valuable role for a guy. If you say, hey, I need you to have a 400 on base percentage. If you have a 400 on base percentage and a 200 slugging, I do not care, because if you're on base, 2/3 of the, or a third of the time, even, or what is that? Like, what is that? 2/3 of the time, something like that. Not 2/3. What would that?
2/5.
40% of the time. We'll just make it really easy. 40% of the time, if you're on base when Yandy Diaz comes up to bat, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We want that. Keeping innings going, just things like that. I think that would be a really cool role for him if he could do that. I don't know if he can, but I'm willing to give him a shot to see if he can. The other side of this trade is obviously moving on from a guy who was a big part of this last season with the Rays, and that's Luke Raley. When you saw that he, not only seeing the trade, but when you saw that he was going to be gone, what was the first thing that came to your mind?
Oh man, those were the first two words. Luke Raley is a genetic anomaly, and I love that. He should not be able to run as fast as he is for how big and chunky he is. He's like the extreme power speeds combo. He hits the ball so hard, he runs so fast, but there is a huge amount of swing and miss in his game. By the end of last season, he was in the first percentile in whiff percentage. Oof. Like, he swung and missed a lot, and he was in the 7th percentile in strikeout percentage. So, like, when he makes contact, he hits it hard, but you can exploit some holes in his swing and get some swings and misses once you know how to pitch to him pretty easily. And I think that showed, because Luke Raley was awesome. I would even consider him in contention for an all-star spot last year because of how good his first half was. But then, because before the all-star break, he was hitting 270, 351 on base percentage, 573 slugging for a 924 OPS, which is really good. That is all-star level. After the all-star game, he hit 219, 307, 370 slugging for a 677 OPS, which is really, really bad. He was bad pretty much all of August and all of September. Barely made the Mendoza line in August, was below it in September. The slugging percentage in September was 317 as a slugging percentage, which is really, really bad. So I think pitchers started to work him out in the month of September and in the second half of the season. So his decline was pretty stark and pretty fast as well. And that, the overall stat line looks good on Raley for 2023 because of how good his first half was, which kind of buffed him for how bad his second half was. So this is likely a case of the Rays thinking, while Raley was great in 2023, is this going to be sustainable into next year? Not really sure. So let's try and trade him at the highest value we think we're going to get from him and not risk him being nowhere near as valuable next year. So it's a tough pill to swallow because he's a super likable guy and he was super valuable to the Rays, being really good in the first half of last year, but he did become a bit of a liability offensively. And he was banged up, of course. We can't discount the fact that he was a bit injured as well. So yeah, I think this is a case of selling high on a guy that was really falling off on the back end of last year, but still getting, a quality replacement in the middle infield in return. So it was kind of a need for need trade. What do you think?
I completely agree. And as much as it kind of makes me sad, because I liked him a lot. He was a fun guy. He was a guy we were kind of high on this show, and we're right on early in the show that he was going to be valuable and be a big part of the season. But all that being said, you may already have his page open, but if you don't, just take a guess at what his F4 was last year.
Ooh, I mean, he was probably negative WAR in the second half. I would guess maybe like 2 and a bit.
You're right on the money. 2.6 F4
Okay.
was what he created last year. The guy we traded for 2 WAR. And I think that if you were to look online and see what people are saying about this trade, you might get the idea that those things were, that gap was bigger than it actually was. Obviously, that you kind of have opposite skill sets here for these two players.
Yeah.
It is interesting to think about it that way. You really do have opposite skill sets here. You have a guy who's going to walk a lot, and he's not going to hit very hard. He's going to play great defense. They do both play great defense because Luke's also going to play great defense because he does play great defense, but he's going to hit the ball really hard and strike out a bunch. So you've got kind of contrasting styles of player, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The Mariners need some power. The Rays need a little extra defense. So it just makes sense. And unfortunately, this is you're not going to be able. I don't think this is a fleece. I don't think that the Rays just completely got one over. I think it was two organizations saying, "This is what I need. This is what I need. Let's make a trade." And do I think that Luke Raley is going to be as good this coming year as he was last year? No, I don't. The points that you made about this was exactly what I was going to say about his WRC plus coming down like quite a bit to earth over the last couple months of the season. It was very clear that you could just eye test. If you watch the games, not the same guy in the back half of the year as the first half. He's got points in his zone that are exploitable. Pitchers were exploiting it. It is what it is. And do I think that the Mariners are going to get some value out of him? Yeah, I think they will. I think they'll get a guy who will provide some value for them. But I don't think the Rays are going to collapse into on themselves like a dying star because he's gone. I think they're going to be just fine, and I think what they got in return was what they needed. It's a move that I'm very glad to see the Rays make because it shows that, not that I have any doubt of this, but it shows they're very in tune with what their roster needs, and they're making good decisions to construct their roster. And I say that because if you look around the league, you can see other teams that are making moves, and you're like, do you understand what your roster needs right now? Are you sure you've looked at your roster to see what they actually need and are doing? We talked about that a little bit last week when we were discussing, the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. Like, are you sure you know what your roster needs right now as you're making these moves? But that's none of my business. And I think it's contrasted by what the Rays did. And we'll talk about the other thing they did in just a second. They clearly know what their roster needs, and they're making moves to provide that. So it's another really good Rays trade in my book.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're bang on the money, whereas it's not really whoa, they totally won the trade, they fleeced him. I think it was exactly a need for need. And excuse me, I don't think Raley is as bad of a player as he was in the second half of 2023, because it was clear that he was not 100%. He was injured a couple times. He had that weird collision thing that put him out for a long time in September, if you remember that. And then I also don't think he's as good as he was in the first half of the season. He's probably somewhere in between on that. So they'll get a decent player. I think they'll get a good corner outfielder who can play some first base. He's a lefty power bat, but he will strike out a lot. I think he's a Carlos Pena that can play the corner outfields, basically. And, those are valuable as long as your whole lineup isn't 9 of them. It's a valuable piece. But I'm excited for what Cabby will bring. I think that's what the Mariners affectionately called him, Cabby. And that might be useful for you if you don't want to say Caballeros all the time.
I may take advantage of that.
Yeah, so we'll call him Cabby for now. And I'm excited for what Cabby will bring. And, it's going to be interesting in spring to watch the shortstop battle play out between Basabe, Walls, if he's in the mix in spring, he may or may not be, and Cabby, who's going to take that spot out of the gate.
Absolutely. Now let me kick you a scenario. Let's say that you come into possession of some hard-earned cash, and you are in need of something to get in exchange for that hard-earned cash. You're in need of some new drip for your wardrobe, and you need to make a trade, some of that hard-earned cash for some drip. and you're looking for a place to acquire that, and you need to make this be a good trade. You need to make this be a good transaction for you. And you're wondering, how do I go about? I don't have Eric Neander in my front office making those decisions for me. Well, I'm not Eric Neander, but I can tell you where you can go to make that exchange, and that is shop.rblrsports.com. If you need to go somewhere to make a great exchange of your money for some excellent clothing, then shop.rblrsports is the place to be. You can also, in addition to getting the best stuff available for Tampa Bay sports, you can also get 10% off of that best stuff available for Tampa Bay sports with promo code FLAPPY, FLAPPY. Get 10% off anything you want to get there, including that awesome shirt, which despite my New Year's resolution, I have not yet acquired, but I will sometime in the very near future. Make that a part of your new year for you, and make that trade today, and you will not regret it. It will be a mutually beneficial trade for you. I guarantee it.
Who needs a fleece when you can just get a well-fitted t-shirt from RBLRsports.com? Do you guys have fleeces? Is that a UK term?
Yeah. When you say fleece, you're talking about like a blanket, right? Like just a nice fleece blanket, or are you talking about something else?
Yeah, like a blanket, but we also have like coats that are called fleeces. Yeah.
I mean, I think I've heard someone call like a nice sweater a fleece. I think I've heard that being suggested. Maybe we should look into that for shop. I mean, it doesn't really get that cold down in Tampa, relatively speaking. It's very cold up here in where I am in South Carolina. It is quite cold, I can assure you. So I could definitely use a shop.rblrsports.com sweater sometime in the near future. So maybe we can look into that. But in the meantime, while we're looking into that, we can also look into the other trade that went down in Rays land. Not that long afterwards, kind of back. I mean, maybe like 2 or 3 hours, in between these things happened. The next trade was between the Rays and the St. Louis Cardinals, which we've done business with in the past. And what do you know? We do business for another outfielder. It's Andrew Kittridge in return for, oh my word, I'm going to butcher it again. Richie's easy enough. Palacios is what I'm going to go with. Was the trade that the Rays made. Kittridge is a reliever that's going into his last year. He's going to start, leave team control very soon. He's going to start getting expensive soon because he does provide a lot of value from a pitching perspective. He's going to, and in return, the Rays get a younger outfielder, as they have liked to do in the past, look for young, toolsy outfield type guys. And it seems like that's what they've done again. What are your thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, so in terms of Kittridge, you're absolutely bang on the money. He's going to enter his age 34 season in 2024, and it's also going to be his last one under team control. So after the end of this year, he is a free agent, unrestricted free agent. So he can go anywhere and command any money that he wants. So the Cardinals better make good on the value that Kittridge is going to get him this year. Meanwhile, Richie Palacios has a ton of team control, at least 5 years. So that's good news for the Rays. They've got 5 years of a player in exchange for one, unless the Cardinals give Kit an extension, which they might do, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes, I suppose, because Kit's still kind of recovering from TJ. He was fully back on the mound by the end of last year, but his stuff didn't look like it was all the way back yet, so we'll see in terms of where Kit's at in 2024 in St. Louis. But in terms of Richie Palacios, very interesting. He's a lefty outfielder. He's more likely to play the corner outfields than in center field, but he probably could. Outfielders can kind of play anywhere in the outfield. He's an interesting guy. He's a student of the game. He's a drive line guy. And I've got some stuff to talk about that in a minute. But the thing I like about Richie Palacios is, while there's nothing particularly eye-popping about him, last year in very limited time, he hit 258 with 6 home runs, 823 OPS, which is a decent OPS for sure. You go on Savant, nothing's particularly popping out at you, except his swing decisions. His swing decisions are really, really good. His chase percentage was only 22.2%, which is well below the average. His swing and miss percentage is well below the average. His strikeout percentage is well below the average. So he knows what he needs to swing at. The problem is, He's making all the right decisions, but it's still not resulting in quality contact that much. His ex-woba is quite low. His hard hit percentage is quite low. His sweet spot percentage is low. His average exit velocity is low. So it's like, what's going on here? And the problem is, and this is a problem we Rays fans are quite familiar with, his ground ball percentage is really, really high. He smashes the ball into the ground all the time. He had in 2023, in limited time and a small sample size, he had a 53.6 ground ball percentage. So more than half of his contact was going straight into the dirt. And it's not the best recipe to get a lot of hits and to have good contact is hitting it right into the dirt. I was doing some digging on Richie Palacios, though, and he and Paul Goldschmidt, you may have heard of Paul Goldschmidt, were at Driveline this offseason, and they posted a video of him getting some hitting coaching. And what I saw was really, really interesting. He is apparently, his swing causes the barrel to be facing or to be tilted downwards when he strikes the ball, which means that even when he is barreling it up, the ball is traveling downwards, like the launch angle is not great. So what he's trying to work on is try and alter his swing so that the barrel is pointed further up on his swing so he can generate more fly balls and take advantage of, his good swing decisions. He knows what he can hit and what he can't. But if he can generate the contact that he's supposed to on those good swing decisions, then he could turn into a really, really solid player. So it's an interesting kind of work in progress that we're requiring here. Is he going to hit as many home runs as Raley? Probably not, but he won't strike out as much. I would argue that he could play, a very similar kind of level of outfield defense to Raley. So it's kind of just hey, we're replacing Luke Raley as a corner outfielder, but with less power, but has a lot of potential in the bag there. How do you feel about Richie Palacios?
I think that he's just another guy that the Rays are going to continue to tinker around with. I think they're aware that with a guy like José Siri, as incredible as he is, he's been a little bit injury prone so far in his career. So having a surplus of outfielders is not a bad thing. Having the ability to, if you need to call guys up that you believe can perform at a major league level kind of at any time, it's just a good thing to have available to you. I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of playing time. I think if we're talking about the movement of Luke Raley, I think to me, that's going to speak more to Josh Lowe being a almost everyday, in my mind, player. I think he kind of is going to, I think he's earned it. I think he will be a very everyday type player for the Rays this coming season. I think that really just cements to me. It's not exactly the same, but this is another thought that I meant to mention during what we were talking about Luke Raley. I do think that what this is kind of similar to, not 100%, but it has some similarities to Bethancourt being moved on from with the Rays to give Pinto the keys. I wonder if it's not quite the same, but maybe it's the idea that we're moving on from Luke Raley because we think that Josh Lowe is kind of our guy, and we're going to give him a lot, just as many reps as we possibly can. He's going to be an everyday type starter. I think he's earned it. I would like to see it. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that, Palacios is going to definitely compete for some playing time, but he's not going to compete with Josh Lowe for playing time. No. He's going to compete with the likes of Aranda, with Meade, with guys like that who are trying to just make the roster and get some playing time there with Cabby. They're going to all be kind of competing for some playing time there. And I think it's good competition. I think you've got guys that have interesting things that they're capable of doing. I'm sure the Rays want to get their hands on them and see what they can develop them into. I think both guys we've talked about today have some interesting developmental things that could happen with them. It's kind of something that I'm looking forward to watching. I've mentioned this on our group chat over the last couple of weeks, and that's that I'm really interested to see the storylines in this season be, as much as I think it's going to be about how successful this team will be, because I think we're going to have a good year, I also am excited to see how players develop. I think you've got a lot of guys with some interesting things going on, and I want to see how they develop. It's Pinto. It's the two new guys. It's Josh Lowe's continued development. It's Caminero. It's it's Carson Williams. There's a lot of other guys that I want to see them continue to develop. I want to see what these guys are capable of. And I'm excited to kind of see that as kind of a secondary storyline, with whatever's going on with the Rays on the major league level, and even some of these developments going to happen on the major league level. But I'm just excited to see what we're going to see from these guys that we haven't seen yet. I think it's one of the fun things about watching baseball, because baseball is really a developmental game. I mean, all sports are, but baseball, I feel like more than some others, is really a developmental game where you're watching guys get better, like day in, day out. Like, you are watching them improve. And I think that's a really cool aspect of baseball. And I think that these two guys are both guys that are candidates for that kind of enjoyment when you're watching baseball. So I think it's just fun to see the Rays continue to bring guys in that they want to develop, that they think have, something great about them that they want to maximize. And I'm just excited to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got so many guys, even you're right on the position player side, but even on the pitching side, we've got so many I wonder how they're going to do in 2024, like Bars, like Pepio, like Savali. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all these kind of works in progress develop. And that leads to a ton of intrigue and a ton of fun. It's a really intriguing and really exciting 2024 roster that it's shaping up to be, and it's only going to get better mid-season with the additions of Rasmussen and Springs as well. So that's really exciting. Something that's plaguing my mind, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, is the outfield's getting kind of crowded, actually, from a Rays perspective at the major league level, because obviously we are going to go injury permitting. The starting outfield is Arozarena, Siri, Josh Lowe. Then, as a fourth outfielder, we've got a bit of a battle brewing between Johnny DeLuca and Richie Palacios. Then you've also got Harold in that mix as well. I know your thoughts on him playing any outfield. We probably don't want to do that. Harold's likely going to be there as a DH, occasionally corner outfield, occasionally first base. Do you think Harold even has a spot on the team next year, or is he going to be moved on?
So I think that's a really good question. And I think, again, the question will be, is somebody going to, because I think somebody's going to have to play him out of his roster spot, because as much as we keep talking about Harold as a sitting duck, he just continues to perform. He continues to hit. So it's like, I don't really want to move on from him. Like, he continues to provide value from a hitting perspective. So it's one of those where I feel like if Ramirez is not going to be on this team, it's going to mean something really good has happened. And that's that, maybe he just doesn't perform well. But I think if you look back, the times where he performs the best is when somebody's pushing him. Like, I remember when Meade was brought up towards the end of last year, it seemed like Harold kicked it into another gear, because he very clearly saw there was some competition for his playing time had just appeared at the major league level. And he said, I don't think so. And he just really balled out for the rest of the year. And I think that I think we're going to see a little bit of that again. I think the Rays, maybe they've tapped into something where they realize, hey, if we challenge this guy and he performs well when his job is quote unquote on the line. I don't think it's that aggressive or that, it's framed that way. But when there's this potential for someone to potentially supplant him, he plays really well. So maybe there's a world where he stays on. And if he's still on the roster, I would think it's because either he's just playing so well that you can't get rid of him, or or the guys that are challenging him are struggling. I find it hard to believe that all the couple of guys that are all going to kind of be challenging for his roster spot, whether it's Aranda, whether it's Meade, Caballero, I find it hard to believe all of them are going to be struggling all at the same time. So it would lead me to believe that, if Harold's still around, that he's playing really well. I do think they eventually will move on from him, but I think it's going to be because somebody's really earned that spot. And then what they'll do is they'll sell high on him sometime a couple weeks into the year. They'll find a team who's getting off to a slow start offensively. They need a little bit of juice. They have maybe they have a good defensive makeup, but they just need a little bit more, they just need some guys to be on base. They need some hitting to just happen for them. I think that you could definitely see a move there for a lottery ticket or even maybe a high value pitching prospect from someone that just needs some hitting. I think there's a world where they do that, and then they just create the room at that time for Caballero, for Meade, for Aranda, whoever is earning those playing time, those innings. There will be that move made then. But I kind of think that unless someone really lights it on fire in spring training, or is just really proving themselves, or Harold plays really, really poorly, I think we're going to see him on the roster, and it's going to be it's going to be fun to see like what happens. Does he kind of fall back to earth finally, and then that's kind of the end of that, or is he playing super well? And then you have the luxury of, you can either, trade him to someone, or maybe you could move one of these three guys because you just have that security there and get something really high value, because like a high value prospect that could be challenging for Major League time could be really valuable, especially mid-season if guys need those kinds of guys. So I think it's a good problem to have, but it's definitely like top billing storyline to watch for the Rays going into next season.
Yeah, Harold, I have learned over the past 2 years. It feels like Harold's just got to the team, but he's been with the team for 2 whole seasons now.
Yep.
Just don't make any assumptions about Harold Ramirez. Nope. Like every time you think something about Harold Ramirez, it's the opposite of that. Like I think coming into last season, we were all kind of thinking, Harold's probably not going to be with the team. He's probably going to get pushed out. And then he stuck around and had another really good season, offensively at the very least. And like you said, every time it looks like his roster spot was under threat, he pushed it on. And then every time you go, you can't just keep swinging out of his shoes until he gets to 2 strikes and then suddenly become, Tony Gwynn Jr. as soon as he hits 2 strikes. But he keeps doing it. And we're like, surely he won't continue to play the outfield anymore. And then he keeps playing the outfield. So just like, I'm just going to stop thinking things about Harold Ramirez. I'm going to zen out and just kind of like enjoy the Harold Ramirez experience while we still have it, because he's such a fun guy. He's such a fun guy in the clubhouse. And if he does stay, I'll be thrilled. If he goes away, then I'll be a bit sad, but we'll probably do it for good reason. And we'll probably get a decent return for a guy that's hit for a really high WRC plus the past couple of years. So Harold, I love you, but like, what are you?
Yeah, it's very weird because, I also think about it I think you make a really good point. I think he's just continuing to, rise his own value, because if he comes out the gate in 2024 and plays really well again, well, now you've got a really significant sample size of this guy just being a really good hitter. And at that point, you kind of just can't ignore it anymore. And if you're a team out there that needs that, like, you just can't ignore that. You've got to be willing to pay for someone of that quality. And I'm excited to see what it might look like for the Rays to potentially, even if they have to move on or they get to move on just to, make a move there. I think it could be a really cool return for someone like that.
All right. So last thing I think we should address before we move on is, does this significantly move the needle in any direction for the Rays? Because especially on the Luke Raley trade in particular, there was a lot of discourse online about, oh my God, the Rays keep trading their good players. They keep getting rid of players that have had a good season for them, and then they don't let them stick around. Do you think this makes the team better or worse? These 2 trades going into 2024, because we lost a former all-star reliever in Andrew Kittridge, and we lost a guy that was really, really good when on, and a left-handed power bat, which we don't have tons of, and we have one less now going into next year. Do you think the Rays' outlook for next year has changed at all?
No, I don't. And again, I think that I don't know the team is like wildly better. I don't think they are. I don't think they're wildly worse. I think it's about the same. And this team is always going to come down to health. When you talk about what the success is going to look like for this team going into next season, if Brandon Lau is healthy, he is the only left-handed power bat you need. So that's the truth there. And if you get a healthy Brandon Lau and Josh Lowe and they're both playing well, you're going to be fine. You're going to have nothing to worry about. So I think that's all I have to say really on that. And, Kittridge, I appreciate his service. I will never forget the 21 season. It was a phenomenal year. If we're just talking about like what I remember about Kittridge, like, I mean, that 21 season from him, he was lights out. He was the guy who, whenever he came in, you knew they were not going to score any more runs. It was a phenomenal year from him. It was really fun to watch. But I think anybody who's watched him since then knows it's just not been the same. He just hasn't had the same kind of stuff since then. And I hope that he returns to that form. I'd love to see it. He's a fun guy to watch. I really enjoyed watching him because he seems to have this calm, cool, collected nature about himself when he's on the mound that is really kind of intriguing to me to watch. I like seeing it, but I kind of just I just don't know that he's going to return to the value that he was providing before. So I don't think it's a huge loss. I think the Rays traded from a position of strength when it comes to their bullpen. I think they have a lot of guys that are going to be challenging for those bullpen spots. We wouldn't even have time to get into all the, the challenge, the people that are going to be fighting around for the bullpen. That's a whole episode just talking about what's going to happen with the bullpen. There's a lot of moving parts there. So I don't think it's a huge blow to the team. They improved areas that they needed to make a small improvement in, and they kind of did a move for a move in the outfield. So I think it's about the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think nothing, maybe, half a win difference in one direction or the other, maybe in terms of WAR, but that's about it. And really, like, we say this every time, but I'm going to keep saying it, is, what does it take to make the playoffs? To win the division, you probably want to aim for somewhere between 97 to 100 wins in the AL East, because it's just that horrible division. To make the playoffs overall, 90 to 93.
90 to 93, I think, is a good aim point. If you win 94 games, you're probably in the playoffs.
Yeah. So can this team win 94 games? Yeah, I think so. Health permitting, yeah. I think so. I think this team currently, as constructed, is roughly probably about 94 to 96 wins, I think, assuming health and assuming kind of reasonable variance. Maybe we lose a couple guys. Maybe we make a good trade deadline acquisition. Like, somewhere between 94 and 96 wins. Things can go better. Things could go a bit worse. But the thing I like about the Rays is their floor is really high. I think because we saw arguably floor last year where like half our rotation died, and we got the Wander Franco incident, and we had all these horrible things happen.
I'd say the last 2 years you saw the Rays floor. The last 2 years have been the Rays floor.
Let's say 2022 was the Rays floor. And what did we win that year? Like 87 wins, 86 wins?
I think it was 88. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It was in the high 80s.
High 80s. And we still made the playoffs. Admittedly, it was the 6th seed, but we still made the playoffs. And that was like with a really, really bad offense. And our offense should not be as bad as the 2022 season. This year, I would be really surprised if that happened. So, and then we're in the playoffs, and you can argue and argue and argue because there's no definitive answer, right? But I am always of the opinion that the playoffs are too small a sample size to kind of go, well, you need to have this, and this to succeed in the playoffs, because everyone always changes what the goalposts are. People always say, well, the Nationals won the World Series just by having 3 good starters and 2 good relievers and like 2 good hitters. Yeah, fine. But then the Red Sox won the World Series the year before by having like a team of stars. And then the Dodgers won the World Series by having a team of stars. And the Braves won the World Series without their best player. So it's like you can't ever construct a narrative of what succeeds in the playoffs apart from just like be there and hope it all works out. The only thing I hope for the Rays in the playoffs this year is calm down, chill. You're a good baseball team, because that was what went wrong for me last year against Texas, is that we seemed to play nervous. We seemed to play like we, didn't deserve to be there, or like we were playing like we had to really press and have a point to prove, which we don't. We get to the playoffs every year now. It's just a thing that we do. So just like chill, play your usual brand of baseball, and you'll be fine. But I don't know why that kind of played nervous last year, but that's the only thing I want to see in terms of difference of a playoff approach.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that the Rays have talked about a lot is continuity and wanting that continuity at the team. And I think it's because they've seen the Rays get tight in the playoffs before. And so I think the hope and the goal is that having that continuity, having these guys be together as a unit, these core guys, the Paredes, the Josh Lowe, the Yandy, the Bilal, the Randy, like having these guys together and consistently is going to result in positive things in the postseason. I feel like that has to be what their goal is. And they've done everything as we've seen so far to continue to create that. They're trying to support those guys and give them what they need around them to allow them to succeed that way. Like, the truth is, we still haven't seen what we talked about. We've seen what the floor of this team is. We haven't seen the ceiling. I don't think we've seen it yet because we haven't seen a year where Yandy Diaz and Randy and Bilal and Josh Lowe are all healthy, and Isak are all healthy and ready to go and firing on all cylinders all season long. Now, are you going to see that all season long? Probably not. But if you have really quality seasons of full health from all those guys, that's a very dangerous team. Not even discussing the pitching, which seems to always work itself out. And and you're going to get guys back from injury. So like there's a lot of really good things happening. This team has, been resilient, and I really hope that this is a year where we maybe get to see them on the other side of the bad luck of injuries and get to see what this team is really capable of firing on all cylinders.
Absolutely. It's an exciting and an intriguing year. What I think is good, even if we're not healthy, I think position player wise, we've got a really good amount of depth. I think we've done a really good job of building that. And yeah, if we can have less than 2 Tommy Johns this year, that would be great.
What would also be great is if you who are watching, thank you for watching and being a part of what we're building here. And if you would give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow us on all the various social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, even though I'm not on there. There are people that are on there, I think. Follow us on all the platforms, continue to support us. We're trying to build the best possible content for you. We're going to keep doing that. And as this exciting season is going to start ramping up, we want you to be here for all the awesome things that we're going to be doing and seeing us here talking about how great the Rays are going to be this coming season. So thank you, all of you, for coming and being a part of this show. And we hope to see you again next week and the week after that and the week after that. And until that time, Rays up.
Raise up. Spring training games start in 7 weeks.
7 weeks.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.